Hello children, good morning to all of you. So in this video, we are going to recall the chapters which we have for our UT2 exam. So what are the chapters we have for our UT2 children? Chapter number 1, concept of timeline, and chapter number 2, ancient civilizations of the world. Okay children? So we have two chapters, chapter number 1, concept of timeline, and chapter number 2, ancient civilizations of the world. So first let us recall chapter number 1. What did we learn in chapter number 1? So what is concept of timeline about? So here we learned what is a timeline and how to draw a timeline and what is the use of drawing a timeline or knowing about the timeline. Yes or no children? Yes. So first, what is a timeline? So what do you mean by timeline children? So by learning about a timeline, we can know about the events or the activities or some memorable days or some memorable things that happened in the past. That is history. So why do we want to learn about the history? So by learning the history, we know what happened in the past. We know what are the events or what are the activities that happened before our birth or our father's birth or our grandfather's birth and so on. Okay children? So that is why we need to learn the timeline or to know how to draw a timeline. Okay? So timeline is the arrangement of events and years. Timeline is arrangement of events and years. Okay children? Yes. So how do we arrange the events and years in a timeline? So do you remember how did we draw the timeline? We drew a line and here we wrote the events and here we wrote the year. So it is like this. So do you remember till this? Yes. So here in the timeline we are arranging the events and years. Okay. So how do we arrange the events children? We arrange it in an ascending order. So arranging the events in, how do we arrange? How do we arrange? We arrange it in the sequential order. Sequential order. That is in ascending order. So for example, 2, 4, 6, 8, that is from the smaller number to bigger number is ascending order. And from the bigger number to smaller number. For example, 15, 13, 12, 9, 8, 7, 5, 4, 1. So from bigger number to smaller number is descending order. Okay children? So this is how the events are recorded in the timeline. Okay. And what is the tool to draw a timeline children? We divide the we divide the timeline into 2. How are we dividing it? What are we referring to divide the timeline? Tool. So we are taking the birth of Jesus Christ. We are taking the Jesus Christ birth as the reference to divide the past. Okay children? So we know that the past is full of so many events. There are so many activities would have happened. So we can't write it in one single line, right? So we are taking the birth of Jesus Christ as the reference and we are dividing the timeline into 2. We are taking it as the central point. We are taking tool is birth of Jesus Christ. We are taking Jesus Christ's birth as the central point and we are dividing the timeline into 2. Are you all clear children? Okay. What are we referring it? we are referring his birth as 1 CE. We are referring the Jesus Christ's birth as 1 CE. Okay children, what do you mean by CE? CE means Christian era. CE means Christian era. Jesus Christ belongs to Christianity, right? He belongs to the Christian religion. So, it is Christian era. And the events or the activities or the days which you need to remember, some memorable days. So, those events which happened before his birth, we call it as before Christ or before common era. Okay children, the events which happened before Jesus Christ's birth, we call it as before Christ or before common era. Okay children, and the events which happen after the Jesus Christ's birth, we call it as common era or Anno Domini. We call it as common era or Anno Domini. Can you get this children? So, we are taking the central point as the Christ's birth. We are taking Jesus Christ's birth as the central point, which we refer it as 1 CE. That is 1 Christian era. He belongs to Christianity religion. So, we are writing it as 1 CE. And the events or the activities which happened before his birth, before the Christ's birth, we call it as before common era, and the events and activities which happened after his birth, we call it as common era or Anno Domini. Okay, so what do we call the year 2000 as? 2000 is like we all have born, right? So it is in common era, okay? And what about the year in which we got independence? When did we get independence, children? We got in 1947. So we got independence after the Christ's birth. We got independence after the Christ's birth. So it comes under common era. So can you get this, children? Yes. And next we are taking the central point as Jesus Christ's birth, which is referring as 1 CE. And the events which occurred before his birth, here the years are counted in backwards. Okay, and the events which occur or occurring after the Jesus Christ's birth, here the years are counted in forwards. Okay children, so this is how a timeline should be and this is how we should draw a timeline. So for here, we are now in 2020. Then it is counting in forwards. Okay children, can you get my point? 2021, 2022. 2023. So this is how the years passes or year goes after Christ's birth. So in case of before his birth, in the events which occurred before the Christ's birth, here the events are counted in backwards. So how is it counted? For example, 2000 and 2500, 2600. So it goes on. 3000. 3500. So why are we writing like this, children? Because we don't know where is the end. History is full of events and we have so much to learn in the past. We don't know when the world came. So many things are there. Okay children? So there is no end to the timeline. So that is why we are counting in backwards. So can you see this? 2000, 2100, 200, 300, then 500, then 600, then 3000, 3100, 200, 300, 500, 600, 700. It goes on. 4000, 5000. It is like that. So similarly here also we don't know where is the end. So 2020, 21, 23, 24, 25. It goes on. Can you get my point, children? So this is how the timeline should be and this is how we are counting the years. Before his birth we are counting in backwards and after the Jesus Christ's birth we are counting in forwards. Okay children, so that is all about the timeline. And next, periods of history. So we know, as I already said you, history is full of events. There is a vast story, a vast time that is in the past. Okay. So we are dividing the history into 3 segments. What are the segments, children? They are ancient period, medieval period and modern period. The history, as it is very big or very large of vast time, we are dividing into 3 segments. They are ancient period, medieval period and modern period. Okay. So we are dividing history into 3 segments. So what are we studying in the ancient period, or what ancient period represents? So the events that occurred in the very distant past denotes the ancient period. So as I already gave you the examples and showed you in the slide, can you recognize all these, children? Try to remember everything. Okay. So the early man or the hunter and gatherers, how a human being, they lived in the forest and ate animals, right? So all those period will come under the ancient period. All those time comes under the ancient period. And medieval period. What does medieval period represents? The king's rule. We learnt about Ashoka, Krishnadevaraya, Shahjahan, Shivaji and everyone, right? So those period or those time which was ruled by the kings, all those years comes under the medieval period. And what about the modern period? Modern period is the time that we are living with all the technology development and robotics. Yes or no, children? So everything comes under the modern period. So this is how history is divided. Okay. Then we are going to see one more concept. How the century is calculated. We have the next concept. How the century is calculated. Century, okay. So here we are going to know how the century is calculated. Okay, children. So to find out in which century we are living, we need to take the year which is running, the current year. What is the current year, children? It is 2020. 2020 is the current year. And what is the formula to find the century, children? We need to add the digit 1, okay, to the first 2 digits. So first, we need to take the current year, and next, we need to take the first 2 digits of the year, that is 20. They are the first 2 digits, and we need to add 1 to it. Okay? 20 plus 1. What is it, children? 21. So the current century which we are living is 21st century. Okay? So this is how you need to calculate the century. I'm going to ask you one more question. So what is the century in which we got independence? We got independence in the year 1947. And the next step, we need to take the first 2 digits of the year, that is 19. Then we need to add 1 to it. 19 plus 1 is 20. So, we got independence in 20th century. Are you all clear, children? So, these are the concept we learned in first lesson, that is concept of timeline. First, what is a timeline? Timeline is the arrangement of events in sequential order, that is in ascending order. And how the events are recorded. So what is a tool to record the events? So we divided the timeline into 2, taking the birth of Jesus Christ, Christ's birth as the reference. We are taking it as a reference and we are dividing it into 2. That the events that occurred before his birth, we call it as before common era or before Christ, and the years are arranged or counted from backwards, and the events which occur or occurring after his birth, we call it as common era CE or Anno Domini AD, and here the events are arranged or we are counting in forwards. Okay children, and next we learned about the periods of history. So how the history is divided, what are the segments, that how we divide the history. We divide it into 3 segments. They are ancient period, medieval period and modern period. Ancient period represents the events that occurred in very distant past. Medieval period are the period or the time where the kings ruled us, right? So that time we call it as the medieval period. And modern period is the time in which we are living. The recent times is called as the modern period. And the last concept is how to calculate the century. So if somebody is coming and asking you in which century we are living, so you need to tell them as 21st century. So how will you calculate it? So you need to take the current year in which the period goes, okay, the time period of the current year. So you need to take the first 2 digits of it and add 1 to it. So whatever number comes after adding 1, that will be your current century. Okay children, so this is all about the first chapter. You need to read the entire text, refer to the tutorial videos which was sent before. Okay children, and prepare very well for the exam, and good luck children. All the best. Let us see in the next video. Kindly see the next video of where we are going to recall chapter 2, that is ancient civilizations of the world. We'll meet there children. Thank you.